Amora had always envied the rich. As a little girl, she used to walk past the grand estates in the city, watching women step out of luxury cars in elegant dresses, their laughter carrying the scent of expensive perfume. She swore that one day, she would be one of them. But life had other plans. At 25, she was barely making ends meet, hopping from one job to another, struggling to afford rent. Her best friend, Zainab, was the only person who kept her sane. Unlike Amora, Zainab was content with the simple things: a steady job, a loving family, and an honest life. Amora, money isn't everything, Zainab would often say. Amora would laugh, waving her off. You say that because you don't know what it's like to want more. That all changed the night Amora met Chief Odiu. It was at an exclusive party, one she had barely managed to sneak into. The room was filled with powerful men and women, sipping on expensive champagne, their voices dripping with influence. But none were as commanding as the man seated at the center, Chief Odiu. Dressed in flowing agbada, adorned with gold rings and beads, Chief Odiu exuded wealth and mystery. His eyes were deep, dark pools of secrets. Rumors about him were endless. Some said he had a hand in politics. Others whispered that his money came from things better left unspoken. But there was one common story: his wives never lasted more than a year. Yet, when Amora approached him, she saw only one thing: opportunity. "You are different," Chief Odiu said, his voice a smooth, rich baritone. "You see beyond what others fear." Amora smiled. "Fear is for the weak. I see possibilities." Chief Odiu studied her for a moment before leaning closer. "I need a wife?" Amora's breath hitched. "A wife?" "Yes. A young, beautiful woman. She will be well taken care of. But she must be willing." A spark ignited in Amora's mind. She knew just the person. "I have someone in mind," she said, already picturing Zainab. Chief Odiu smiled. "Bring her to me." And just like that, Amora sealed her best friend's fate. The next morning, Amora sat across from Zainab at their favorite roadside food store, stirring a cup of hot millet porridge. The sun cast golden hues on the bustling market, the air filled with the rich aroma of freshly baked bread and fried akra. Zainab, ever the early riser, was already dressed for work in a modest but neat outfit. She was the kind of woman who found joy in simple things, her heart untainted by greed. Amora, on the other hand, saw life as a battlefield, one where the winners took all, and the losers faded into obscurity. "You look like you have something on your mind," Zainab said, sipping her tea. Amora forced a smile. She had spent all night crafting her plan, rehearsing the words that would convince Zainab to walk willingly into Chief Odiu's arms. "I do," Amora admitted, leaning in. "I found the perfect opportunity for you." Zainab arched a brow. "Opportunity?" "Yes, a way out of this struggle. A way for you to have everything you've ever dreamed of." Zainab chuckled, shaking her head. "Amora, you know me. I don't need much to be happy. But what if you could have more?" Amora pressed. "What if you could live in a mansion, travel the world, and never worry about money again?" Zainab sighed. "Amora, hear me out." Amora took a deep breath, lowering her voice. "I met someone. A powerful man, wealthy beyond imagination. He's looking for a wife." Zainab frowned, suddenly wary. "And you thought of me?" "Yes," Amora said quickly, reaching for her hand. "You're beautiful, Zainab. You're kind and gentle, exactly the kind of woman a man like him needs." Zainab pulled her hand away, her expression skeptical. "What kind of man is he?" Amora hesitated, then smiled reassuringly. "A businessman. Influential. He's older, yes, but he's generous. He would take care of you." Zainab's eyes narrowed. "Older? How old? Does it matter?" Amora deflected. "Think about your family. Your mother still struggles with medical bills. Your younger siblings need school fees. This marriage could change everything for them." Zainab sighed, staring down at her tea. "I don't know, Amora. Marriage isn't something I take lightly." "I know," Amora said, her voice softer now. "That's why I brought this to you. This isn't just any marriage. It's a chance at a life most women can only dream of. Zainab was silent for a long time, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Amora felt a flicker of doubt. What if she refused? What if she saw through the carefully woven lies? Finally, Zainab exhaled deeply. I need time to think. Amora's heart pounded. She was close. So close. Of course, she said, forcing another smile. Just don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. Zainab nodded, but Amora could see the hesitation in her eyes. Amora knew she would have to push harder. She had promised Chief Odiu a bride, and failure was not an option. Zainab sat in front of her small mirror, staring at her reflection. A part of her was still hesitant, but Amora's words echoed in her mind. This marriage could change everything. She thought of her mother, who worked tirelessly selling vegetables in the marketplace, of her younger siblings who often went to school on empty stomachs. She had always been the responsible one, carrying the weight of her family's struggles. Maybe this was her chance to ease their burden. With a deep breath, she picked up the elegant dress Amora had given her, a deep green gown that hugged her figure modestly. She wasn't used to dressing like this, but Amora had insisted that Chief Odiu expected elegance. The black SUV rolled to a stop in front of an enormous iron gate adorned with intricate gold carvings. Zainab's hands tightened around her purse as the guards nodded and opened the gate, allowing them inside. This place is huge, Zainab whispered as they drove past manicured lawns, a fountain in the shape of a lion, and a mansion so grand it looked like a palace. Amora smiled, patting her hand. It's nothing compared to what's inside. Zainab wasn't sure if that was reassuring or terrifying. As the driver pulled up in front of the grand entrance, two men in matching black suits opened the car doors. Ready? Amora asked, stepping out gracefully. Zainab swallowed hard but nodded. They walked up the marble steps into a grand hallway lined with expensive paintings and golden chandeliers. The air smelled of rich incense, a thick, musky scent that made Zainab's head spin slightly. A butler led them to a sitting room furnished with velvet chairs and a long glass table. Everything screamed wealth. Then, he entered. Chief Odiu. He was taller than Zainab had expected, dressed in a flowing agbada embroidered with gold patterns. His silver beard was neatly trimmed, and his deep, dark eyes held an intensity that made her uneasy. My dear Amora, he greeted, his voice deep and commanding. Amora beamed. Chief, it's an honor as always. Chief Odiu turned his gaze to Zainab, scanning her from head to toe. His expression unreadable. So, he said slowly, this is the woman you spoke of. Zainab felt her palms grow damp. There was something about the way he looked at her, as if he were assessing not just her beauty but something deeper. Amora placed a reassuring hand on her back. Yes, Chief. This is Zainab. Chief Odiu's lips curved into a small smile. Beautiful. Just as you described. Zainab forced herself to smile back, but inside, she felt something shift. A whisper of warning in the back of her mind. He gestured toward the couch. Please, sit. She did, her body stiff as he sat across from her. Amora settled beside her, her excitement barely contained. I assume Amora has told you why you are here, Chief Odiu said, leaning back. Zainab nodded hesitantly. She mentioned marriage. His smile widened. And what do you think of that? Zainab glanced at Amora, who nodded encouragingly. She turned back to Chief Odiu. I don't know much about you, sir. But I would like to. Chief Odiu chuckled. A wise answer. He studied her for a moment before speaking again. I am a man of tradition, Zainab. I believe in taking care of my wife, making sure she never lacks anything. In return, I expect loyalty, obedience, and understanding. Zainab swallowed hard. The word obedience lingered in the air. Of course, she said softly. Chief Odiu's smile never faltered, but his eyes darkened slightly. Good. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small box, placing it on the table in front of her. A gift, he said. Zainab hesitated before picking it up. Inside was a gold bracelet with small, intricate carvings of animals, lions, serpents, and birds. It was beautiful, but there was something eerie about it. A token of my affection, Chief Odiu said, watching her reaction closely. Thank you, Zainab murmured, slipping it onto her wrist. The moment it touched her skin, a strange warmth spread up her arm. Chief Odiu leaned forward slightly. I will give you time to consider my proposal. But know this, Zainab, I do not offer my hand lightly. Zainab nodded, unable to find her voice. Amora squeezed her arm, grinning. You won't regret this, Zainab. But as Chief Odiu's intense gaze held hers, Zainab couldn't shake the feeling that she already did. Zainab sat in the grand guest room Chief Odiu had provided for her. It was larger than her entire apartment, with gold-trimmed furniture, silk curtains that swayed gently despite the absence of wind, and a bed so soft it felt like sinking into clouds. But despite the luxury, she couldn't shake the unease settling in her chest. She glanced down at the gold bracelet Chief Odiu had given her earlier. The carvings, lions, serpents, and birds seemed almost alive under the dim candlelight. When she ran her fingers over them, a shiver ran up her spine. It's just nerves, she told herself. Amora said this is a blessing. A new beginning. A knock at the door startled her. Come in, she called, trying to keep her voice steady. A tall woman in a dark brown wrapper stepped in, her face expressionless. I am Adesowa, the head housekeeper. Chief Odiu has asked me to prepare you for dinner. Zainab smiled politely. Thank you. I'll just freshen up. Adesowa hesitated. Mistress. Zainab frowned. Yes. For the briefest moment, something flashed in Adesowa's eyes, fear, concern. But then, she lowered her gaze. Nothing. I will be waiting outside. As the door shut, Zainab's heartbeat quickened. What was that? Shrugging off her nerves, she went to the vanity, touching up her makeup. But as she reached for a comb, something in the mirror made her freeze. A shadow. It moved quickly across the far end of the room. Not outside, not in the hallway, inside. She spun around. Nothing. Her breath came fast, heart pounding. She swallowed hard, shaking her head. It's just my imagination, she whispered to herself. Still, as she left the room, she couldn't ignore the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her. The dining hall was vast, the ceiling high and adorned with chandeliers that shimmered like stars. The long table, covered in the richest fabrics, was set for three, Chief Odiu at the head, Zainab to his right, and Amora beside her. Welcome, my dear, Chief Odiu said as she entered. His eyes flickered to the bracelet on her wrist. He smiled. Zainab forced herself to sit, but as she glanced around, she noticed something strange. The servants standing against the walls were all still. Too still. Their faces were blank, their eyes unblinking. She turned to Amora, who was already digging into her meal, completely at ease. Chief Odiu raised his glass. A toast. To a prosperous future. Zainab hesitated before lifting her own glass, the golden liquid inside reflecting the candlelight. As she took a sip, a sudden chill ran through her body. The wine was rich, smooth, but there was something else. A bitterness that lingered. Delicious, isn't it? Chief Odiu's deep voice cut through the silence. She nodded, placing the glass down slowly. Yes, very. Good, he said, watching her closely. Dinner continued, but Zainab barely ate. The silence in the room was suffocating. The servants never moved, never spoke. Even the air felt heavy, as if something unseen loomed over them. A loud clang startled her. She turned just in time to see one of the servants, a young girl, trembling as she picked up a fallen plate. Chief Odiu's expression darkened. The girl, her hands shaking, muttered, I am sorry, master. A long silence followed. Then, Chief Odiu's lips curved into a slow smile. Accidents happen. The girl visibly relaxed. Thank you, master. Zainab exhaled, relieved. But just as the girl stepped back, Chief Odiu added, see me in my chambers later. The color drained from the girl's face. She gave a small nod, then quickly retreated. Zainab glanced at Amara, but her friend only continued eating, unbothered. Something was wrong in this house. Very wrong. Later that night, as Zainab lay in bed, she struggled to sleep. The mansion was eerily quiet. Then she heard it. A whisper. Faint, distant. Then another. Help us. Zainab bolted upright. Who's there? Silence. She held her breath, straining to listen. Then, scraping. A soft, slow dragging sound. It was coming from the walls. Her pulse raced as she stood and walked toward the sound. She pressed her hand against the cold marble, feeling vibrations beneath her fingertips. Then, knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Right from inside the wall. She gasped, stumbling backward. The whispers returned, overlapping, growing desperate. Don't drink the wine. Run. He is not what he seems. Zainab's breath came in ragged gasps. She grabbed the bracelet, suddenly feeling like it was burning her skin. A sharp knock at her door made her yelp. She spun around. Zainab. It was Amara's voice. She hesitated before opening the door. Amara stood there, looking concerned. Are you okay? I heard you moving around. Zainab hesitated, then whispered, Amara, something is wrong in this house. Amara sighed, rubbing her temples. Zainab, you're overthinking. No, I'm not. The walls, there are voices. Amara frowned. You're probably just nervous. You're marrying one of the richest men in the country. Of course, you're overwhelmed. Zainab shook her head. No, Amara, I'm serious. Something is not right. Amara sighed. Listen, you're my best friend. I wouldn't have brought you here if I thought there was anything to be afraid of. Zainab bit her lip, nodding slowly. Maybe she was just exhausted. Maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. Amara smiled. Get some sleep. Tomorrow is a new day. Zainab nodded, but as she shut the door, the whispers returned. Only this time, they spoke one name, Odiyu. She barely slept that night, haunted by the voices. And somewhere in the darkness, unseen eyes watched her, waiting. Zainab woke up with a start. The room was still dark, the air thick with something heavy, something unseen. She could hear her own heartbeat thudding against her chest. For a moment, she thought it had all been a dream, the whispers, the knocking inside the walls. But the moment she looked down at her wrist, she knew it wasn't. The gold bracelet Chief Odiyu had given her had darkened. The golden sheen was gone, replaced with a dull, almost rust-like hue. The intricate carvings of lions, serpents, and birds had changed. The once fierce animals now looked lifeless. Something was wrong. Zainab hurried out of bed and grabbed a robe before stepping into the dimly lit hallway. The mansion was eerily silent, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. She needed answers. She remembered Amara mentioning that Chief Odiyu's private study was in the west wing of the mansion, a part of the house that no one was allowed to enter. She moved carefully through the corridors, her footsteps silent against the marble floor. Every few seconds, she glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see a shadow lurking behind her. When she reached the west wing, she found the doors locked. Of course. She looked around and spotted a keyhole. Biting her lip, she crouched down and peeked through. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. Inside, Chief Odiyu was standing in front of an altar. Candles burned in a perfect circle around him. On the altar, there was a large wooden bowl filled with a dark, thick liquid. He dipped his fingers into it and whispered something in a language she didn't understand. Then, he lifted his head. Zainab held her breath, terrified that he had sensed her presence. But he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at something else. Something in the shadows. A presence. It was there, but it wasn't human. Zainab stumbled back, her heart racing. She had seen enough. She turned and hurried back to her room, trying to steady her breathing. Whatever was happening in this house, it wasn't just strange. It was evil. Back in her room, Zainab locked the door and leaned against it, trying to process what she had just witnessed. Chief Odiyu wasn't just a businessman. He was something else. And she had walked straight into his trap. As she paced back and forth, her eyes landed on a small wooden chest near the fireplace. She hadn't noticed it before. Curious, she knelt beside it and opened it. Inside, wrapped in silk, was an old leather-bound book. The cover was cracked with age, the pages yellowed. It was a diary. Zainab flipped it open, her fingers trembling as she read the first entry. My name is Halima. I am Chief Odiyu's third wife. If you are reading this, it means you are next. Zainab's breath hitched. She turned the page. He is not what he appears to be. He is not a man. He takes women, feeds on them, drains them. We do not leave. We do not escape. We become part of the house. Zainab's hands shook as she turned the next page. The others are here, in the walls. If you listen closely, you will hear them whisper. A chill ran down her spine. She had heard them, the voices in the walls. She kept reading. If you are still alive, if you can still run, leave now. Do not eat. Do not drink. Do not let him touch you. Zainab's stomach twisted in horror. The wine, the bracelet. She grabbed at the bracelet on her wrist, trying to yank it off, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if it had fused with her skin. She felt sick. She had to get out of this house. Before she could think of a plan, there was a knock at the door. Zainab stiffened. Zainab, it's me, Amora's voice called. Zainab hesitated before opening the door. Amora stepped inside, smiling. You're up early. Zainab looked at her, searching for answers in her best friend's eyes. Amora, how well do you know Chief Odiyu? Amora blinked. What do you mean? Zainab held up the diary. Did you know about this? Amora's expression darkened for a split second before she forced a laugh. Where did you find that? Answer me. Amora sighed, running a hand through her hair. Zainab, you're overthinking things again. No, Zainab said firmly, stepping closer. You brought me here. You told me this was a good thing. But this, she shook the diary, this says otherwise. Amora hesitated before exhaling deeply. I didn't want to tell you, but yes, I knew. Zainab felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. What? Amora's face twisted in guilt. I had no choice, Zainab. Tears burned Zainab's eyes. No choice. You sold me to him. Amora grabbed her hands desperately. It's not like that. You don't understand. If I didn't bring you, it would have been me. Zainab yanked her hands away, disgusted. You were willing to sacrifice me to save yourself. Amora's lips trembled. I thought, maybe it would be different for you. Maybe you would survive. Zainab stared at her, betrayal sinking deep into her chest. Leave, she whispered. Zainab, please. I said leave. Amora flinched before nodding slowly. I'm sorry. She turned and walked away, her footsteps fading down the hall. Zainab collapsed onto the floor, the weight of the truth crushing her. She was trapped. And she was alone. Zainab's hands trembled as she clutched the diary to her chest. The words of Chief Odiyu's former wives echoed in her mind. Do not eat. Do not drink. Do not let him touch you. She had already failed the first two. Her mind was screaming at her to run, but where? She was trapped in a house where the walls whispered warnings, where shadows moved when no one was looking. And now, the only person she had trusted, Amora, had betrayed her. She had to escape. Now. Zainab threw on a simple dress, grabbed her small bag, and hurried toward the mansion's entrance. The corridors were eerily empty, the flickering lamps casting distorted shadows on the walls. When she reached the grand front door, her breath caught. Two guards stood there, their expressions blank, as if they weren't entirely human. She swallowed hard and approached them cautiously. Good morning, she said, forcing a smile. Chief Odiyu asked me to run an errand in town. The guards didn't move. She tried again. I need to step out for a bit. No response. Her pulse quickened. Did you hear me? Suddenly, the moment she tried to step past them, an invisible force slammed into her chest, sending her stumbling back. She gasped, looking up in horror. The guards hadn't touched her. But the door, it was alive. Something unseen had pushed her away. She gritted her teeth and tried again, running toward the door with all her might. The moment she reached the threshold, boom! An unseen force threw her backward, sending her crashing onto the marble floor. Pain shot through her back as she groaned. She looked up at the guards, expecting them to react. But they simply stared at her, unmoving, expressionless, as if they had seen this happen before. Zainab's chest rose and fell rapidly as realization settled in. She wasn't just trapped in Chief Odiu's house. The house itself wouldn't let her leave. Panicking, she scrambled to her feet and ran in the opposite direction, searching for another way out. The kitchen, the servants' quarters, the back entrance. She tried them all. Every time she reached the door, the moment she touched the handle, she was back where she started. It was like the house was shifting beneath her, leading her in circles. Her breathing grew ragged. She grabbed the decorative vase and hurled it at the nearest window. The glass should have shattered. But instead, the vase simply vanished midair. She staggered backward, her eyes wide. "What is this place?" she whispered. Then, a voice. "You should not have tried to leave." Zainab froze. The voice was deep, ancient, and it was coming from inside the walls. She spun around, but no one was there. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She had to find another way. She was running now, desperate, searching for anything that could lead her out. That's when she saw it. A door. It was smaller than the others, tucked away in the shadows of the corridor. It hadn't been there before. Or had it? She didn't care. She rushed toward it, gripping the handle and pulling it open. A staircase. Narrow. Leading downward. A cold, damp breeze drifted up from below. Zainab hesitated, her gut screaming at her not to go. But she had no choice. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside and began descending into the darkness. The deeper she went, the colder it became. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of old wood and something metallic, blood. She reached the bottom of the stairs and found herself in a stone chamber. Torches lined the walls, their flames flickering weakly. Then, she saw them. Portraits. Row after row of framed paintings, each depicting a woman. Zainab's breath caught as she stepped closer. The faces were beautiful, their expressions frozen in time. She touched the frame of one portrait and read the name carved into the wood. Halima. The name from the diary. Her stomach turned as she moved to the next portrait. Miriam. Then another. Fatima. One by one, she read their names. And then she noticed something even more horrifying. The last portrait was missing a name. But it was her own face staring back at her. Zainab stumbled backward, her hands covering her mouth. "No, no, no, no," she whispered, shaking her head. This wasn't just a house. This was a graveyard. The women before her, Chief Odiu's wives, had never left because they had become part of the house. And she was next. A shadow shifted behind her. Before she could scream, a cold hand clamped over her mouth. Darkness swallowed her whole. Zainab's consciousness flickered in and out, her body heavy as if weighed down by unseen chains. A dull throbbing pounded at the back of her head. She could hear faint whispers, the kind that made her skin crawl. As she forced her eyes open, the first thing she saw was fire. Torches lined the walls, their flames casting eerie shadows that twisted like living things. The air was thick with the pungent scent of herbs, incense, and something metallic, blood. She was lying on a stone altar, her wrists and ankles bound with silk cords. The same gold bracelet was still wrapped around her wrist, but now it was glowing, the carved animals shifting, moving as if alive. Then she heard it. A low, rhythmic chanting. Her breath caught as she turned her head. Chief Odiu stood at the center of the room, his agbada replaced with a dark robe, his face illuminated by candlelight. He wasn't alone. The servants who had seemed so lifeless before were now moving, swaying in a slow, hypnotic trance. Their eyes were blank, their lips murmuring in a language she couldn't understand. and beside them stood Amara. Zainab's heart twisted. Amara's face was unreadable, but her eyes flickered with something: guilt, fear. You shouldn't have tried to leave, Zainab, Chief Odiu's deep voice echoed. Zainab struggled against her restraints. Let me go, Chief Odiu sighed, stepping closer. You do not understand what is happening here. Zainab's pulse raced. I understand perfectly. You kill women, you drain them. You trap their souls in this house. A dark smile tugged at his lips. Not kill, my dear. Transform. Zainab's stomach churned. You're a monster. Chief Odiu chuckled, placing a hand over his chest as if amused. A monster. No. I am simply a man who has lived for centuries. Zainab's blood ran cold. Centuries. He continued, a long time ago, I was cursed by a powerful deity. My wealth, my power, it comes at a price. Every few years, I must take a wife and, he gestured around him, share my essence with her. Zainab's breath came in short, sharp gasps. What does that mean? Chief Odiu sighed, as if disappointed in her ignorance. Each wife becomes part of me, part of the house. Their beauty, their youth, their souls, all merge with my own. That is how I remain powerful. Zainab's stomach lurched. You mean, you consume them? He smiled. In a way, yes. She felt bile rise in her throat. And Amara, what did you promise her? Chief Odiu chuckled, but it was Amara who stepped forward this time. Her hands trembled as she spoke. I was supposed to be next, Amara whispered. But I made a deal. Zainab stared at her best friend in horror. You sold me to him. Tears welled in Amara's eyes. I didn't want to die, Zainab. I didn't have a choice. Zainab felt her world shatter. The one person she had trusted most had led her straight into the jaws of death. Chief Odiu clapped his hands, and the chanting grew louder. It is time, he announced. The servants approached, holding a golden goblet filled with a thick, dark red liquid. Zainab's heart pounded as they lifted it toward her lips. Drink, and you will become one with me. She clenched her teeth and shook her head violently. No. I won't do this. Chief Odiu sighed and motioned toward Amara. If she will not drink willingly, you know what to do. Amara stepped forward, tears running down her face. I'm sorry, Zainab. Then, before Zainab could react, Amara pinched her nose shut and forced the liquid into her mouth. Zainab screamed, thrashing against her bindings. The taste was thick, metallic, it burned as it slid down her throat. Her body convulsed. A fire spread through her veins, 1,000 voices whispering in her mind. She saw visions, the faces of the other wives, their screams, their pain. And then, she felt herself slipping away. Her body was being absorbed into the mansion, her soul merging with the countless others before her. Her screams echoed in the chamber, but outside the walls of Chief Odiu's mansion. No one heard her. Zainab felt herself slipping, her body was heavy, her limbs numb, her consciousness barely clinging to reality. It was as if she were sinking into a bottomless pit of darkness, her soul being pulled in different directions. The whispers grew louder. Join us. Become one. You cannot escape. Her eyes fluttered open for just a moment, but what she saw made her wish she hadn't. She was no longer in the ritual chamber. She was in a void. A vast, endless space where shadows twisted and groaned. Faces appeared and disappeared in the blackness, women. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths moving in silent screams. She recognized them. Halima, Miriam, Fatima, the lost wives of Chief Odiu. Zainab's chest heaved as she fought against the invisible force dragging her deeper. No, she screamed. I will not become one of you. But the voices only grew more desperate. It's too late. You drank the blood. You belong to the house now. Zainab's heart pounded as she tried to move, to escape. But the blackness wrapped around her like a second skin, pulling her deeper into the abyss. This can't be how it ends. She refused to be another forgotten soul, another nameless woman trapped inside Chief Odiu's twisted legacy. But then, a voice cut through the darkness. Zainab. Fight. Her eyes widened. She knew that voice. It was Amara. Zainab gasped as she felt hands grabbing her, pulling her upward, back toward the light. The void around her trembled. The shadows screeched in agony. She opened her eyes and found herself back in the ritual chamber, her body convulsing, her skin drenched in sweat. Amara was above her, shaking her violently. Zainab, wake up. Zainab coughed, gasping for air. Her head pounded, her vision blurred. Chief Odiu's furious voice boomed through the chamber. You fool! What have you done? Zainab blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of what was happening. Amara was holding a small dagger, the blade dripping with blood. And then she realized the blood was Chief Odiu's. Amara had stabbed him. The servants around them froze, their trance breaking as a low, guttural roar erupted from Chief Odiu's throat. His body shook violently, his skin darkening, his features twisting into something inhuman. Zainab's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary man. This was a demon. Chief Odiu's body began to expand, his limbs elongating, his fingers sharpening into claws. His eyes burned red, his voice deepening into a monstrous growl. You dare betray me? He bellowed, his voice shaking the walls. The entire mansion trembled, the chandeliers swinging, the torches flickering wildly. Amara grabbed Zainab's arm. We have to go, now. Zainab stumbled to her feet, her body weak but her mind sharp. She turned to Amara. Why? She gasped. Why are you helping me now? Tears filled Amara's eyes. I made a mistake, she whispered. I thought I was saving myself, but I was only feeding the monster. Chief Odiu let out a piercing shriek, and the ground beneath them split open. A massive, dark abyss yawned beneath the chamber, tendrils of black smoke rising from its depths. Zainab and Amara ran, dodging falling debris as the mansion began to collapse around them. The spirits of the past wives, Halima, Miriam, Fatima, all appeared, their ghostly hands reaching toward Chief Odiu. You will not take another. Chief Odiu thrashed wildly, his monstrous form consumed by the very souls he had trapped for centuries. He let out a final, soul-shattering scream as the spirits dragged him into the abyss. The ground closed over him. And then, silence. Freedom. But at what cost? The mansion stood still, the eerie glow in the walls fading. The servants, once lifeless puppets, collapsed to the floor, their bodies finally freed from Chief Odiu's control. Zainab and Amara stood in the ruined chamber, panting, trembling. They had done it. They had defeated Chief Odiu. But at what cost? Zainab looked down at the golden bracelet still on her wrist. It had turned black, the carvings now nothing but lifeless scratches. She touched it hesitantly, and it crumbled into dust. She exhaled shakily. It was over. They were free. Amara turned to her, eyes filled with tears. Can you ever forgive me? Zainab hesitated, her heart torn between rage and relief. But in the end, she sighed and nodded. Let's just go home. And as the sun rose over the ruins of Chief Odiu's mansion, the whispers finally ceased. For the first time in centuries, the house was silent. The sun rose over the ruins of Chief Odiu's mansion, its golden rays washing away the remnants of the night's horrors. The once grand estate now stood in eerie silence, its dark power extinguished. Zainab and Amara walked down the long, winding path leading away from the mansion, their footsteps light but their hearts heavy. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The past few days had changed them forever. Zainab still felt the weight of everything, of nearly losing her soul, of realizing the truth about Chief Odiu, of betrayal and redemption. She had trusted Amara with her life, only to be sold into the hands of a monster. But in the end, Amara had saved her. As they neared the village, Amara finally spoke. Do you think it's really over? Her voice was soft, uncertain. Zainab exhaled, staring at the horizon. I don't know, but I hope so. The mansion was gone. The spirits were freed. The curse should have been broken. But deep inside, a small part of her wondered, can something that evil ever truly die? That night, Zainab returned to her small home. She was exhausted, drained beyond belief. As she prepared to sleep, she glanced at her wrist, where the cursed bracelet had once been. It was gone now, nothing but dust. She sighed in relief. But just as she lay down, ready to let the horrors of the past fade into memory, she heard it. A whisper. Soft, distant, but unmistakable. Zainab. Her blood ran cold. She sat up, her breath hitching. Silence. For a long moment, she stayed frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, shaking her head, she lay back down. It's over, she told herself. It had to be. But as she drifted into sleep, in the deepest corners of the night, the shadows in her room seemed to move, watching, waiting. Because some curses never truly end. If you enjoyed this story and want more thrilling, suspenseful, and mysterious tales, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. More exciting content is coming your way, don't miss out. Subscribe now.